the internet because it allows people to take what they've learned at school and and apply it into a completely different world. It opens up literally the entire world to you.
What is up, everybody? And hello from planet Earth. I'm your host, Philip. Most of you'll know me as Phil, and this is the Future Minds podcast. Simply the best podcast out there, covering all you need to know in edtech, online learning, the digital economy, and what's being done around the world to shape the minds of the future. In today's episode, I'll be speaking with Kgothatso Meka. Kgothatso is a South African real estate developer focused on providing affordable housing at scale. He started his career in investment banking, which provided him with the tools necessary to master the world of finance and deal making. Kgothatso spent time working as an asset manager at Old Mutual Alternative Investments, focusing on steering their 1.4 billion rand schools investment fund, which focused on systems and infrastructure investments to build new, affordable private schools in South Africa. He moved to Cosmopolitan Projects in 2019 and later that year founded the Cosmopolitan Property Developments, which is part of the Cosmopolitan Projects and Central Developments Group. Kgothatso remains passionate about education, technology, and providing South African communities with access to an affordable, dignified education and home environment. In this conversation, we unpack topics such as the current challenges and opportunities in South Africa, the need for basic infrastructure and access to education, Kgothatso's personal education journey, and advice for young South Africans, as well as a range of other topics. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with Kgothatso, and I'm sure you will too. Without further ado, I give you Kgothatso Meka. Kgothatso Meka, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time. So to start off, maybe just give us a little bit of background as to who you are and what you do.
Okay, well, my name is Kgothatso Meka. I am a property developer, previously in investment banking and investments, but now focusing exclusively on property development, largely on affordable housing all across Gauteng.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your education journey. How did you get to where you are today?
Well, I think I come from a very, I suppose, interesting time in South Africa. I started school in the early 90s, and that's just when our country was going through what we could call an interesting transition. And I started my schooling journey at St. David's, Marist Brothers College, actually. And yeah, it was like very few Black people in those schools at those times, because it was only like really around about that time where we were allowed to go into some of these schools. St. David's is a very good private school, and yeah, it actually taught me and exposed me to a hell of a lot. At the time, I was still living in Soweto, so yeah, I literally spend a good 2.5, 3 hours of my day just traveling to and from school. But very, very, important what it did for me, because it exposed me to just a different side of life, and it allowed me to kind of like believe, because my surroundings changed quite significantly. And then also on top of that, at the school, like the education was just like absolutely world class. I was only there for a few years, about 4 years, and then I moved to other schools in Gauteng. But I'd like to say the foundation was laid, and I still pay huge homage to the foundation that school laid in my life. Post that, I went to university. I studied finance and investments at the University of Johannesburg, all the way up to honors level. And then I began working, and just to brush up on my educational skills, I also started doing my master's in property studies at UCT, which I'm trying to complete at the moment. So yeah, that's a nutshell of my education journey.
And looking at the South African context as a property developer, there are certainly some infrastructure shortcomings in the schooling environment. A lot of our government schools are ill-equipped to adequately educate the South African youth. What are some of the things that you have come across in your experience as either a property developer or working in the investment banking space, that schools that South Africa can do from an infrastructure standpoint to improve that education challenge that we face?
Well, look, before property development, and when I was in investments, I worked for um, a school fund. So we were managing capital on behalf of investors, and our mandate was to exclusively look at schools and build independent schools, trying to bridge that gap because the quality of education in this country has you know gone down quite a bit, and the government is also trying to solve a lot of problems, not just education. And so the idea of the fund was to take some of this capital, and instead of just putting it into MTN or Steinhoff or whatever, put it into alternative assets such as housing and education, and assist in building new schools, but also monitor the quality of that education, because it's one thing spending 100 million rand on the infrastructure, but if what's happening inside of those schools is not well monitored and taken as seriously as that building and that infrastructure, then is there really a point? So I spent 5 years at this fund, and we're managing, I think, just what, 1.4 billion rand, and we did many investments across uh, the private schooling. And the nice thing about it was that our mandate was to actually do affordable independent schools, because every time people think of independent schools or private schools, they think of your St. David's and your St. John's, etc. And then that just creates even bigger inequality in South Africa. So this mandate actually capped us and said you cannot charge, I think at the time I was there, more than 23,000 rand a year in school fees. So that actually allowed us to tap into the more affordable market. So we built schools in so-called lower income areas, and school at the time was costing 60, 70 million rand. So we'd buy land, we partner with people that are already in the education space, that are already running schools. Maybe they run one small school, but they've got the ability to actually operate a school. So we'd come in with the capital and the business background. We'd partner with these individuals, and just like any other business, we'd put in debt and equity in these schools businesses, and then roll out the schools. And once that's been done, you've spent your 50, 60, 70 million rand building the school. We as a fund would actually also monitor not just the financial performance of the school, but also the academic performance, which was just as important as getting repaid. So I think there's a lot of stuff that can be done, a lot of ideas such as that can still be rolled out. I mean, with the 1.4 billion rand, which sounds like a lot of money, but in the greater scheme of things, it's actually very, very little money. We were able to, at the time, we built about 26 schools. The average performance, when you looked at just like the metrics such as your metric pass rates, was about 20% higher than the national average, which was positive. And I think South Africa should be looking at more solutions like that, instead of just sitting and always criticizing the government, and it's about what
Yeah,
can we do as
yeah,
normal citizens, and what can we do as business.
yeah. Well, education starts at home. So tell us a little bit about Cosmopolitan Projects and what you're doing to provide homes for people across Gauteng, and in doing so, providing children with the facilities that they need in order to further their education.
So I actually met the Cosmopolitan guys and came across this business while I was still in the education space, because being one of the largest residential property development companies focusing on affordable education, there was synergy there. And throughout their time, I mean, historically, they would just build houses like every other developer. But over the last, call it, 5 to 10 years, they changed their strategy to, instead of just being a developer building houses, buying land and building houses, they started doing mega developments where it's quite integrated. I mean, some of the developments that they do consist of like 10, 15,000 houses. So for them to make the lives of their customers just holistic, they started looking at integrated developments. So partnering with people that will come in and bring and build shopping malls, that will build schools, and not just any school, but like good quality schools. Um, Making sure the areas have got fiber, etc. So there was just a natural chemistry between what we were doing and what they were doing, and they did, like, I mean, they were absolutely integral in uh, us rolling out some of the schools that we did in their developments, because they weren't looking at actually making money through this, because their core is property development. So they were able to purchase the land in their developments at pretty much cost price, just so that they can recover their costs. And they actually built our schools also at cost price. And that makes a huge difference for a school operator, because if it's costing me 50 million rand to build a school, instead of going out to the market and getting a normal contractor who's going to charge you 65 million, it allowed us to then charge lower school fees
Yes.
in our school, and thus opening up the access to the to all sorts of communities. So they continue to play a huge role in actually stimulating and being part of that ecosystem of rolling out affordable quality education. Um, when I look at all of our plans going forward in all the different townships that we're building, it's not just home stands that we put in our plans, but we actually have a lot of like demarcated areas just for schools. So even going forward, we are still open to working with various school operators to come into our communities and build schools in our communities, so that people not only have a dignified home, which we provide and we pride ourselves in, but also that the children in those schools can, have access to quality education.
Yeah, that's incredibly important. Real estate development in South Africa obviously has its regulatory challenges. You've got financial challenges to overcome, and in the end of the day, brick and mortar is a difficult task in and of itself. That said, what motivates you to do what you do?
I mean, I come from these townships we speak of.
Hmm.
You can't just look at the end result and see me here in my office and being a property developer. It was a journey. Like I say, being born in Soweto, and just having that exposure of poor communities around you, and 2 hours later you're in Santon and you're seeing all this beauty and wealth around you. It kind of it did something to my mind. And my mom had always emphasized the importance of education, and it's through education and through working very hard and getting myself educated that I've been able to get to where I am. And what motivates me is that I'm not special at all. I think I'm, pretty average guy actually who just works hard, and has been well educated. But I come across many, many, many uh, people that are 10 times smarter than me that just didn't get that opportunity. So I'm motivated by just trying to help where I can to give as many people in our country this opportunity, to be able to uplift themselves and thus uplifting their families and then thus uplifting the rest of the country. And I think that's just the one thing that we actually really, really, really need in South Africa. You often hear politicians or people in business or whatever saying, it's important to get education, but having being a product of that and actually having being part of rolling out, the strategy of building new schools and actually seeing the impact that it's had on many, many people's lives and continues to have. I just want to, continue on that trajectory and make sure 100, 200,000 more people have these opportunities.
Great. Some of the challenges that we look to as a society when it comes to education is access to education. But a lot of challenges are really sort of champagne problems. South Africa has the highest income inequality factor in the world, and this is obviously an issue that we need to remedy through education and a whole bunch of other means. That said, what advice would you give a young South African who does come from an underprivileged community, who doesn't have the opportunities that a lot of people in developed countries, as well as from privileged backgrounds, do have? What sort of advice can you give a young South African looking to build a career for themselves the way that you have?
I mean, look, before advising him, I just want to make it clear that, like, I, as much as have worked very hard to be where I am, I also didn't come from squalor. My mom was a nurse. She was able to buy a little house. I had a roof over my head. I had 3 meals a day. As much as she struggled to pay the school fee, she was able to do that for me. So that in itself is privilege. So I can't fully identify with, you know, a kid from Alex who, maybe is an orphan or both
Sure.
parents unemployed and there's like 8 people in the house. And those things do play a huge role. Telling someone like that just go to school and all be all right, makes me a little bit uncomfortable because I just don't know that sort of challenge. But what I would say is that in life in general, we we all have problems, and I always tell my younger brother this, that you always have to just play the cards that you dealt. There's a lot of people that are much poorer than us. There's a lot of people that are much richer than us, but you can't focus on that because that's not going to change. That's just the cards that you dealt. Rather focus on playing those cards. And what I would say to those younger South Africans is that the first step is education. That's just the reality, especially if you come from a situation like that. Um, People just won't take you seriously if you don't have something that's backing you. So just
Yeah.
start with, and it's not just about the paperwork, and I think that's one of the problems in South Africa, that people will be like, yeah, I went to school and I got a degree or whatever. Um, I've got a qualification, but I don't have a job. But like, there's a reason they call it a qualification. You
Mm.
qualify to be
Yes.
in the real world. It doesn't really mean nothing. One of my partners here in the business, who runs one of the big groups within the business, um, always says you can't take that degree to Standard Bank, to Nedbank, because if you do and say I want to cash it in, they're going to laugh at you. So it's important, but it doesn't really mean much. All it says is you're worth giving a chance to. So
Yes.
start there, get yourself educated, and go out there and hustle. Um, again, in South Africa, we complain a lot, but you look at people from Zimbabwe. I mean, those people are educated. Majority of
Mhm.
the population is very educated and very smart, but they come here and they'll take a job as like a plumber or a street worker or working in a restaurant because they're not going to just sit there and complain. And then next thing you know, the guy is a manager. The next thing you know, he's running his own store. So instead of complaining, they work
Yeah.
with the
Take
cause that
action.
they know. And you want
Yeah.
to look at poverty. Africa and South Africa is not the only poor country. You go to Asia, if you travel. I mean, I was in Bali the other year, and gee whiz, I mean, it's not the most formal economy. People are out on the streets hustling, selling something.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of attitude that we need. And I think in a country that's full of opportunity like ours, if you get yourself educated first and you have a positive attitude, whether it's in a year or 3 or 5, something will give
Yeah.
because business people and just corporations are looking for problem solvers with good attitudes. So it doesn't matter where you start.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great message. So shifting gears a little bit, 2020 has obviously been a very interesting year from all angles. How has the coronavirus pandemic and lockdown in particular impacted your business?
I mean, it's been tough for everyone, and we were locked down. Our business is a people's business. We employ over 1,000 people, and half of them are out there on the streets. They're doing construction, we selling houses. So when you say sit at home, that was very very tough for for us as a business. But again, the culture of this organization is a bit similar to what I was talking about playing the cards that you dealt. And it's about being innovative. It might be a big company, but all of our leaders are, very accessible and can make decisions within a matter of hours or days. And, we had to adapt very quickly from doing things online, that's on the sales side, um, restructuring the organization and being able to be, all hands on deck to be able to survive. We all had to play our part, take salary cuts for a month or two, um, so that we can all survive. But on the other side, we were able to come through it quite well because interest rates have dropped quite significantly, which stimulates the housing market, especially the affordable housing market. I mean, when I say affordable housing, I'm talking about houses between, call it 500,000 up to 1.5 million. That's our bread and butter. So, as much as those are the people that lost their jobs during the
Mhm.
lockdown, because there's such a huge backlog in providing affordable housing, um, if you use round numbers, say there's 1 million people that need uh, affordable houses, and 200,000 of them lose their jobs. There's still 800,000 people working,
Yeah.
needing these houses, and the country as a whole, maybe we're doing 10, 15,000 a year. So now suddenly that 800,000 are working with interest rates that are like 300 basis points lower. And they're like,
Yeah.
this is definitely the time to purchase. So it's been quite positive. The results have been stronger than expected. And, we foresee that happening for the next year or two. Um, and just continuing to look at different products to be able to roll out to the communities that so desperately need access to housing.
Great. So access to housing is one thing, but then access to the internet, particularly as it relates to education. How important is this in your business, and how do you factor that in when developing these homes for people?
Well, and again, I'll use myself as an example. Um, I mean, we're in 2020 now, and access to internet is, if you're like middle class, everyone's got internet. But I mean, I'm 36 now, and 15 years ago, internet wasn't as really accessible as it is now. But I was lucky, I had a smartphone, and I could, and I got into it quite early, and listening to different podcasts, etc. And I often say the internet pretty much saved my life, because as much as I was going to university and studying, I just still wasn't sure, because there was no, kind of advice. My mom has done everything for me, but she's a nurse and she only knows so much. My grandfather was a factory worker, my grandmother was a domestic worker, my aunts are nurses. Whereas, and social capital is an important thing. Coming home and being able to discuss your career plans and get advice from your mom, your dad, your
Sure.
uncles and extended family is important. And what the internet did for me, I was able to listen to podcasts. So as a 19, 20-year-old, I could like download a podcast of like someone in the United States, and that's exactly what I did. And I'd listen to like different lectures and conversations of people at like Stanford University, from Harvard, and just how people built up their careers, and that kind of like didn't help me to plan. And I kind of followed some of the plans that I come across, and again, that's how I got to where I am. So I'm a huge believer in access, not just to education, but to the internet, because it allows people to take what they've learned at school and and apply it into a completely different world. It opens up literally the entire world to you. I mean,
Yeah.
you can Google anything. I always say Google will never come back to you and say, "Hey, are you stupid?" You can literally ask it anything, how
Yeah.
to do X, Y, and Z, and it'll give you an answer, no judgment. So in our communities, I mean, access to internet is vital, and we've got a partner who does the fiber and an ISP. But again, it wasn't an easy journey. It wasn't just about come, let's get Vodacom or whoever. We needed the right partner who understands that you will make your money. Might not be in 2, 3 years, but it's going to be over the long term, because we need those prices as low as possible. And I
Yeah.
mean, our clients are already spending, it sounds like nothing, but 600,000 Rand to some families is a lot of money, and they're
Mm.
working very hard for it. So now they're also paying school fees at the schools that we put up there. We need those schools to be as affordable as possible. Access to internet, because these schools try to integrate online into their programs. So I need that ISP to come in at a price that's as affordable as possible. And we've got a few models that we've rolled out, and in every single one of our new developments, that is part and parcel of the development, actually.
Great. So are you predominantly focused on Gauteng at the moment?
Yeah, just because of the nature of our business, we just believe that you need to be able to drive to your problem. You don't want
Mm.
to you don't want to have to fight your problem. Property development is a tough space. You need to manage meticulously, timelines, everything, and then also there's the construction. When you watch television, and you'll hear about the construction, yeah, communities. So when it's all in Gauteng, which is where we're based, we're able to manage that process quite intensively. Another thing, this is where the market is. This is where the jobs are, and this is where the influx of people coming from all over South Africa, they continue to come to Gauteng. So it doesn't really make sense for us to go to where they're leaving.
Of course.
Let's focus on the backlog is already massive here. And so Gauteng is our focus.
Great. And going forward, what are some of the projects that you're most excited about?
I mean, a lot of them. I mean, if you look at our development at Sky City, which started in 2016, when we're doing 18,000 there in different phases, of course.
Wow.
And about three odd thousand have been built and occupied. So we still have 15,000 that we're rolling out. Want to build more schools there. We built a school in partnership with Royal Schools, which is operating and doing well. We've got a massive shopping center there, which needs to grow. So that's a very, very exciting project there, and continuing to just improve our product. And there's another one in Pretoria called Sammy Marks. Again, another mega development, which is going to be similar to Sky City in terms of doing integrated development, where you're going to bring shopping centers, schools, roll out different types of houses, and then it's proper integrated communities. You have a 600,000 rand house all the way up until call it 2 million. So South Africans mixing, and it's just very exciting. There's a lot of opportunities in property development, residential property development, and it just when you see the start where you're literally just buying raw farmland with there's nothing on there, it's just the felt, and 5 years later you build your first house, and 5 years later there's like 3, 4, 5,000 houses there. There's schools, there's shopping centers, and just people have dignity, and you can see the joy in their faces. I just can't wait to continue doing that. I think it'll be nice to also do a project with the government, because I'm a big believer in the private sector and the government working together to try solve some of these enormous problems that our country is facing. We can't do it alone. The government can't do it alone. I don't see why we can't do it together.
Yeah, I mean, on that point, what is the current state of gap housing, affordable housing, and RDP housing in South Africa at the moment?
I mean, we don't really do RDP, but we do tap into the FLISP subsidy. So, certain houses, if you're buying a 500,000 rand house, 550,000 rand house, the client is able to get a subsidy from the government up to, I'm not sure, but about, call it 50,000 rand, which helps, because if you're buying a 500,000 rand house, who knows, the payment on that is probably like 4,000 rand, but if you can get 50,000 rand off that, takes your payment to under 4,000. So it really does help our clients. And these are a lot of things that people don't know about, that what our government is actually doing. It's not just about them building houses and giving them away, but they've also assisted many people to access houses like ours. But the reality is that there is a backlog everywhere, whether it's affordable housing, gap housing, RDP housing. There's a massive backlog. But again, I say, you're only going to just dent it if we all work together. I mean, even in the private sector, we as a business, we like competition, because we can't service this market alone. And we often help some of our competitors, because the more the industry grows, the more we can actually solve this problem.
Yeah, that's a very mature approach, especially given the fact that there is competition in the market. One of the things that stands out to me is the technical challenges faced in coordinating such massive projects. What sorts of technology have you adopted internally in order to streamline those processes?
I mean, it's very difficult to say because the property development starts all the way from land development up to sales. But of course, technology is a big part of what we do. But I think, speaking of technology, I think it would be much better if, say, on the government side, because they're the guys that are actually processing a lot of these applications, if they could improve on the technological side, because a lot of stuff is still done manually, and you often have to drive there and do a submission. It gets stamped, taken to this department, through the corridors. So I think that's where it can improve. It can improve
Yes.
A lot. For us, I mean, there's a lot of projects. I mean, there's a lot of products for private developers that we use, just for our own statistics and making our life a lot easier. And we continually assess different types of technologies, but it has to be useful. And I find, a lot of, I suppose this conversation is shifting a bit, but a lot of developers of technology often try solve problems that don't exist. So it's important for you to know what the actual problem is. It doesn't help for you to develop an app that can brush my teeth. You're clearly very smart that you can develop something like that. I mean, cheapers, but it's not really solving any problems. So I think that's where the challenge is with a lot of the technology that we see out there. It's like, it's fantastic, it's great, it's innovative, but it's not really solving my core problems
Yes.
of business.
Yes. Something that I've often felt is that Silicon Valley startups often focus on Silicon Valley problems and not developing problems like we have in Africa. So to round off this conversation, I'm going to ask one last question that we ask all the guests, and that is, what do you believe about education, or the current state of education, that most people may disagree with?
That most people may disagree with. I mean, I think it has its place. I know the biggest criticism is how education has changed, and we're still doing the old, boring approach. But I think in a country like ours, where we are so far behind, I think even just doing that step, the good old-fashioned step, I think even just doing that and making sure we're doing that right, I think it's still very, very beneficial.
That's a very good point.
You got to crawl before you start walking and running. And I think some of those problems about like innovation and how education is delivered globally, I mean, you're comparing yourself to, Eton College and, world-class schools, or even locally to like St. David's, St. John's, St. Mary's. I think those are the guys that should be looking at kind of disrupting the existing model, because they've got the facilities and the capital to be able to execute that and be a working model. And that's not to say I'm not for innovation and technology in how we roll out education. In fact, I'm a big supporter, and I think it can make life a lot easier. But all I'm saying is, like, for a country like ours and where we are in that education spectrum, even the good old, I'll even take the good old fashioned sitting down in a class, writing exams, because I think we're so far behind.
That's a really, really good point. Kgothatso, I really appreciate you taking the time, and I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much. And for those that are listening that want to find out a little bit more about yourself, or a little bit more about your companies and what they do, maybe just give us a little bit of information where people can reach you.
Yeah, I mean, they can check out our websites on just Google Cosmopolitan Projects, and a lot of information will come up there. You can see the different developments that we're rolling out, and we literally cater for everyone. If you're looking for a 3-bedroom house and your budget is 600,000-700,000, we've got something for you. If you have 2 million rand and you're looking for something, we've got something for you. So you can check out Cosmopolitan Projects and Central Developments, which is our other company. And to reach me, you can just hit me up on email, Kgothatso Meka, Kgothatso M at cosmopro.co.za. That's KGOTHATSOM at Cosmo, which is COSMOPRO.co.za.
The Future Minds podcast is brought to you by Smartic. Smartic is an award-winning, intelligent, online mathematics and coding program for kids aged 4 to 14. Powered by sophisticated, adaptive AI, Smartic teaches kids math and coding from the comfort of home in as little as 15 minutes per day. For more information, visit smartic.com or download the app on tablet or iPad today.